Meaning what?
Meaning the NGA will not support this dinner. If the president wants to have a dinner with his friends and have a black tie dinner with his friends on that night, that is perfectly fine. It will not be an NGA event.
And you have a commitment from Republican governors on that?
Oh, we have a commitment from the organization. This is a bipartisan organization where Democratic and Republican governors come together to work on addressing the needs of our people. And I'm honored that my peers selected me to be the vice chair of it. I am thankful for the leadership of Kevin Stitt, a Republican, the Republican governor from Oklahoma, who serves as the chair. And we know that in this time, the president cannot use this time to divide our organization. Our organization stands firm.
This may look like a dispute over invitations, but it's actually a test of whether national institutions can remain neutral under political pressure. What's really being tested here is whether bipartisan governance can survive when access to power is selectively granted. This raises broader questions about how informal presidential traditions are being used to reward loyalty and sideline dissent. In this video, we'll break down how a symbolic dinner became a referendum on institutional independence and democratic norms.
Governor, later this month, President Trump, will host an annual meeting of governors at the White House. He's only inviting Republican governors to that, which is traditionally a bipartisan event. And he's specifically excluding you and Democratic Governor Jared Polis from a separate dinner. You're the vice chair of the National Governors Association. Do you know why you are being called out and excluded?
It's particularly confusing because just a few weeks ago, and I led a group of Democratic and Republican governors to the White House. And we had a meeting with the White House where we signed a memorandum of understanding around energy and trying to increase energy supply and bring down energy costs. And so one thing I know is this, is that you can uninvite, you can untweet, but you can never erase. And so if I was selected by my peers, both Democratic and Republican governors, to serve as the vice chair of the National Governors Association, we focus on getting things done for our people, and we're not interested in being able to go to fancy dinners with the president if he wants to exclude certain members. So since the president had decided that I'm not going to be invited, this will not be an NGA event.
Meaning what?
Meaning the NGA will not support this dinner. If the president wants to have a dinner with his friends and have a black tie dinner with his friends on that night, that is perfectly fine. It will not be an NGA event.
And you have a commitment from Republican governors on that?
Oh, we have a commitment from the organization. This is a bipartisan organization where Democratic and Republican governors come together to work on addressing the needs of our people. And I'm honored that my peers selected me to be the vice chair of it. I'm thankful for the leadership of Kevin Stitt, a Republican, the Republican governor from Oklahoma, who serves as the chair. And we know that in this time, the president cannot use this time to divide our organization. Our organization stands firm that if you exclude one, you exclude us all, and this will not be an NGA event.
Moments ago, the hearing reached a point where words stopped being procedural and became declarative. The senator's voice did not rise for theatrics. It sharpened. A blunt assessment landed on the record, describing the situation not as complicated or misunderstood, but as indefensible and embarrassing. In that instant, the room shifted. Because when language like that is used in a formal setting, it signals that something deeper than policy disagreement has surfaced. It signals a fracture between what the system claims to stand for and what it is allowing to happen. That moment matters because hearings are designed to normalize power. They translate human consequences into administrative language. But here, that translation failed. The statement cut through layers of talking points and forced the issue into moral clarity. It suggested that what is unfolding is not a matter of partisan framing, but a test of whether institutions are still capable of self-correction when confronted with their own outcomes. What we witnessed was not simply criticism of enforcement practices in one state. It was an indictment of a governing philosophy that treats accountability as optional and transparency as inconvenient. When an elected official openly acknowledges that a situation damages the credibility of the system itself, it exposes how far the gap has widened between authority and responsibility. Power, when insulated from consequence, begins to justify itself. And that is when governance quietly drifts away from justice. The exchange revealed something else as well. It showed how normalization works. Policies do not become controversial overnight. They become routine first. They are defended as necessary, then reframed as unavoidable, until questioning them is portrayed as disruptive rather than essential. The senators' words interrupted that process. They forced a pause. They reminded everyone listening that the role of government is not to defend its own machinery, but to serve the people who live under its decisions. This is where leadership is truly measured. Not in moments of consensus, but in moments when the system's own actions reflect poorly on its values. Leadership is revealed in the willingness to say that something carried out under official authority still fails the standard of decency. That acknowledgement does not weaken institutions. It strengthens them. Because a system that cannot admit error eventually loses legitimacy altogether. The broader context matters. Across the country, trust in institutions has eroded not because people are uninformed, but because they are paying attention. They see the distance between rhetoric and reality. They notice when accountability flows downward but rarely upward. And they recognize when moral language is used selectively, depending on who holds the lever of power. This hearing moment resonated because it echoed a growing public understanding that the rules are not being applied evenly and that excuses are being substituted for responsibility. What was said on that dais also underscores a deeper conflict within the American system itself. A system built on checks and balances depends on internal friction. It relies on individuals willing to confront their own side when lines are crossed. When that friction disappears, oversight becomes ceremonial, hearings become performances, and justice becomes a word used more often than it is practiced. The force of this moment came from the refusal to let that happen quietly. There is a temptation in modern politics to treat outrage as noise, to dismiss sharp criticism as exaggeration. But not all condemnation is theatrical. Some of it is diagnostic. When a veteran lawmaker describes a situation as indefensible, it is not meant to inflame. It is meant to warn. It is a signal that something is being justified that should never have reached the point of justification in the first place. This is why the moment will linger beyond the hearing room. Because it speaks to a fundamental question facing the country right now. Are institutions capable of restraining themselves, or do they only respond when public pressure becomes impossible to ignore? The answer to that question will determine not just policy outcomes, but whether democratic accountability remains meaningful or merely symbolic. The system does not correct itself automatically. It responds to insistence, it responds to scrutiny, and it responds when people refuse to accept sanitized explanations in place of honest reckoning. Moments like this hearing remind us that democracy is not preserved by silence or convenience. It is preserved by confrontation with uncomfortable truths, spoken clearly and recorded permanently. As the cameras shut off and the room empties, the consequences of what was said do not disappear. They follow the agencies involved, they follow the officials responsible, and they follow the public, which must decide whether such moments become catalysts for change or footnotes in a long record of unresolved failures. Because history is shaped less by what is known and more by what is tolerated. When the line between acceptable and unacceptable is allowed to blur, the cost is paid gradually, often invisibly, until it becomes impossible to ignore. The hearing today was a reminder that the line still exists and that it can still be named. The question now is whether that naming will lead to action or whether it will be absorbed and forgotten. That choice does not belong solely to those in power. It belongs to everyone watching, listening, and refusing to look away. If you believe accountability should never be optional and truth should never be inconvenient, support our work to expose it. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.